Great, thank you so much for asking me to say a few words. And I should just by background explain that I'm a paediatrician, and I trained here in the UK and in Canada in infectious diseases, and I've been leading the paediatric infectious disease service here in Oxford Children's Hospital for the last 20 years. But the other part of my life is as the director of the Oxford Vaccine Group. And what we do is work on the development of new vaccines, testing of vaccines, right from discovery in the laboratory through the different phases of vaccine development. And those studies are both here in the UK, but also internationally, particularly in low and middle income countries. And I thought today I would just spend a few minutes quickly describing some of our experiences of the last year in developing the Oxford COVID-19 vaccine. And I'll go very quickly through that, and then very happy to take any questions at the end. So it does seem a long time ago, since January last year, when we heard that this pneumonia outbreak that was occurring in China had spread outside of the country. And that this news headline is the 14th of January last year, but the first cases appeared here in the UK over the next couple of weeks. So it was a very rapid spread from that moment. And I'm sure you'll be very aware that we have over 130,000 deaths have occurred in the UK over that period of time, and more than 5 million globally. And one of the reasons why we've been able to respond so rapidly, in fact, across all the vaccine developers, is we know quite a lot about coronaviruses. We've had two important outbreaks over the last 20 years, the first being SARS in 2002, and then MERS in 2012. And these coronaviruses had a very high mortality. SARS was about 11% and MERS 35%. So in many ways, we've been very fortunate in this pandemic in having a pandemic of a virus that kills less than 1% of people. If this had been MERS, a third of us would be dead today. And so we started work in January of last year in working out how to make the vaccine. And as I mentioned, we had a lot of knowledge about coronaviruses and how to make vaccines from them, which made this first part relatively straightforward. So making the vaccine, testing it on animals, and then manufacturing to get the first doses into glass vials ready for the phase 1 studies. And I initiated the phase 1 studies on the 23rd of April. And you can see here that the vaccine induced neutralizing antibodies with 1 dose, even better responses with 2 doses, and also good responses in the T cell compartment. So the 2 types of immunity that we need for protection were both induced by the vaccine. And so we then moved on at the end of May to the phase 2 trials, which were to test whether the vaccine worked in older people. And here you can see data showing that with 2 doses, there's no difference in the immune response in someone who's over 70 or someone who is under 70. The green and purple are the under 70s and the gold is the over 70s. There are lower responses if you give only 1 dose, but for those who have 2 doses, there are great responses. With that information, we could then initiate the phase 3 trials, which were run across 19 sites in the UK, 6 in Brazil and 7 in South Africa. A very complex logistical operation to both make vaccines for 2 doses for 25,000 people and to ship them during lockdowns to these different countries around the world. And that was the most enormous effort from my team in Oxford to make all that happen, particularly since we couldn't travel there. And so all of the training had to be done online with the teams in these different locations. We also, towards the end of April, beginning of May last year, made a partnership with AstraZeneca so that they could assist us with the global manufacturing and distribution of the vaccine if it worked. And they set up over the course of that next 12 months, 20 manufacturing sites in North America, in Russia, and in Japan. And I should say the trials that were run in North America, Russia, and Japan to test the vaccine in other populations. and also a really important partnership with the Serum Institute of India, the world's largest vaccine producer, which helped secure this important program. Now, by the end of November last year, we had the first data showing that in those who were vaccinated in the trials, no one died or was admitted to hospital, showing the vaccine had very high efficacy. And that those data that appeared at the end of November allowed us to prepare the dossier for regulators, which was then submitted to the UK regulator, the MHRA, who gave approval on the 30th of December last year for use of the vaccine. So that program of work took just 8 months from the first needle into a volunteer through to regulatory approval, which is certainly the fastest program I've ever been involved with over 20 years in Oxford. And the data from those trials was then used to inform the European Medicines Agency approval, which then led directly on to World Health Organization recommendations and the approval of manufacturing sites in Korea and in India, which allowed the vaccine production to begin for Covax. And Covax is the international organization which supplies doses of vaccine to low and middle income countries. And up until last week, just over 300 million doses had been distributed. It's about 330 million now to populations all over the world to make sure that people everywhere are protected. And we know from the UK data that already over 110,000 lives have been saved as a result of the UK's vaccine program. And when we look at the current global status for our vaccine developed in partnership with AstraZeneca, about 1.3 billion doses have now been distributed, which is about a quarter of the global supply. And we can project that probably somewhere over 1 million lives have been saved by the program, put together by this remarkable team of people in Oxford and around the many trial sites in the UK and elsewhere. And so I'm going to end there. I'm very happy to take any questions, and just my acknowledgements to the team in Oxford, all the investigators, and the volunteers in the clinical trials.